it's crazy, but it's
You're watching Channel Z, the world's leading zombie apocalypse channel, broadcasting live from Studio Z.
makes me act the way I do.
And hello, welcome to another episode of the Dr. Z Show on Channel Z, a discussion of evolutionary medicine in the apocalypse. As always, I am your host, Joe Alcock, MD, a professor of emergency medicine at the University of New Mexico, zombie apocalypse expert in my spare time. So today we're going to be talking about one of the newest preoccupations of those interested in all things apocalyptic, and that is monkeypox. So today we're going to be joined by, yes, a pox upon all your monkeys. I would mention that there's some discussion about changing the name because it may disparage monkeys, and anyway, just to be serious here, there's some thought that we shouldn't name diseases after either animals or geographic regions, and I'm sure we'll get into that at some point. So I've got my co-host Athena Actipus, who's going to be part of this conversation. Hi,
hey,
Athena.
Joe, how's it
Hi.
going?
It's going well. I'm excited to have this conversation, and it's good, of course, good to see you on the Channel Z show again.
It's great to see you, Dr. Z. And I have to say that, for me, as I've been thinking about monkeypox, it has made me think and wonder just in general about how do we figure out what we need to worry about, how we need to worry about it, what we need to do, when we need to change what we're doing or not, because, there isn't just one zombie apocalypse, right? We have so many different kinds of zombie apocalypses all happening at the same time, and multiple pandemic apocalypses. So, so it just, it makes me think about that bigger picture a lot.
It does. And I would mention, when we first started having conversations about zombie apocalypse medicine, and I should mention, we have an important conference coming up next month that is going to be pretty exciting. The zombie apocalypse medicine meeting, October 20th. Please check out zombiemed.org and sign up to receive some underground updates about that event. That's going to be exciting.
To register and come join us. We will be in person and live streaming on Channel Z. So it'll be in studio.
In studio, exciting. So not just via Zoom or StreamYard or YouTube. Exciting stuff. But when we first started talking about this, I think that we were thinking about apocalypses in more of a kind of a theoretical, hypothetical kind of a sense. And here we are with multiple apocalypses that we have to cope with. How are you coping?
Yeah. I just try to embrace the apocalypse. I figure, or the apocalypses, it's a matter of, if you can kind of look at it and be like, all right, this is what's going on. So how do we adjust? How do we make the best of it? How do we manage our risk without completely and utterly shutting down our lives? Or if we have to do that for a little while, okay. And then, how do we get back to the things that are most important to us, or continue to do the things that are most important to us while the apocalypse is raging on all around us?
So jumping into this topic for today, which is monkeypox. It's certainly something that has gotten a lot of attention. It's something that public health folks and medical folks like myself and the general public are interested in. But so it's a risk. It's this new thing, and we have to figure out how we're going to cope with it. Luckily, it's not just going to be you and me talking about this today. We have some special guests.
Some experts on infectious diseases, pandemics in particular.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna head to the background to handle your comments. So we want to hear from all of you in the audience. Please send us your comments, your questions. That's the whole point of a lot of what we're doing here, is for it to be a conversation, not just with those of us who are on the stream, but with everyone. So keep those comments coming in, and I will be backstage most of the time handling those. So yeah.
So then we'll see, Athena. I'm sure you'll be back. Today, we're going to be talking about monkeypox with our fantastic guests. We have Dr. Becky Smith, who will join us in a moment, and Dr. Jessica Brinkworth, who is a longtime guest on this program. So exciting stuff. Let's jump right in, and let's bring on our special guest, Dr. Becky Smith. There she is. Hello.
Hey, it's great to be here with you.
Well, we are thrilled to have you. And just by way of introduction, I should mention that you are at the University of Illinois. You are an expert on emerging infectious diseases, including West Nile virus, and ongoing infectious apocalypses like COVID-19. And you are also knowledgeable, I understand, about our newest preoccupation and apocalypse of monkeypox. Is that right?
Well, I like to learn about all the infectious diseases because I do infectious disease control. That's my specialty.
Right, and we are thankful to have folks like you as deeply involved. What have you been working on mostly apart from monkeypox?
So mostly the last 2 years, it's been COVID all the time.
Yep.
But a lot of my work is on vector-borne disease. So West Nile virus, but also tick-borne diseases like Lyme disease and rickettsial diseases. And one of particular interest to me is alpha-gal syndrome, which causes a red meat allergy if you've been bitten by a tick.
Ooh, a tick that causes a food allergy to meat. Wow, what a trip. I've read about that. I don't know if I've seen it in my patients in the emergency department, but that's certainly something.
You probably don't have the right ticks around you, but we do here in Illinois. So
I hope so. That's one advantage of being in New Mexico, of having very little rainfall. There just are way fewer ticks.
yes.
I should mention, just since you brought up West Nile virus, I was just in Arizona, in both Phoenix and in Sedona, and I had this little mosquito that landed on me and had these little characteristic little white and black stripes on its legs. And it was a day biter, and it seemed to be kind of focused on me as a human being. And I was worried about that particular vector, the mosquito, and what that means for infectious disease. Do you have any comments about that?
That would be an Aedes mosquito. They are highly attracted to people. They are day biters. The bite hurt, I bet.
Yeah.
Hurts a little bit more than most mosquito bites. They do not carry West Nile virus, at least
Thank
not
God.
very well. They're not very good at that. They are quite common in places as carriers of dengue and yellow fever and chikungunya viruses, but those aren't endemic in Arizona. So,
Yet, right?
Yet.
So talk about other apocalypses coming down the pike. Now, that's not the topic for today's conversation, but what an interesting topic. And I was complaining about these mosquitoes to my wife, and she pulled up an article in the Albuquerque Journal from that day, and it said, yep, Aedes aegypti has invaded Albuquerque, New Mexico, where it was thought we were too high and too dry to worry about that new vector. But it's here. And it's
They're
here
really
to stay.
good at living around people, and they only need a teaspoon of water to breed. So they don't care about the dry.
Mm-hmm. Well, before we get into monkeypox, and I'm going to pose the question to our audience too. We'd love to see some comments from those of you listening or watching about how worried are you about monkeypox? How worried do you think we should be? Are we sufficiently worried? Too worried? Where does it kind of fit into the spectrum of anxiety around apocalypses? And before we do that, I'm going to also remind you to smash that like button. So please like us on YouTube. Give us, thumbs up, 4-star reviews, 5-star, many stars you think we deserve. Please do that so we can get the word out from our important
all
messages.
the stars,
Please,
the stars,
every
all the
star.
buttons, just all those buttons on the
Just
bottom.
smash them, please.
Push them.
There we go.
Yeah.
Thanks. Helps us stave off these apocalypses. All right. So here's our question. How worried should we be? I just went through my email to figure out how many emails we've gotten at my work in the Department of Emergency Medicine about monkeypox, and it's relatively few. It's not kind of made much of a conversation, which seems like we're dealing with other crises. And I would say I'm not seeing cases. Maybe we don't need to worry. Maybe this is a little overblown. What do you think, Dr. Smith?
So I'm going to give the classic epidemiologist answer. It depends. It depends on who you are and where you live. So you in Albuquerque, working in a hospital setting where you have lots of PPE, lots of protective equipment, I don't think you should be worried.
Okay, it looks like Zoe Gould here is commenting, we are not worried enough about monkeypox. Maybe Zoe's in a different location.
Yes. So several cities have had a major problem. I know we're close to Chicago here at University of Illinois. Chicago has had a large outbreak. Certainly in certain communities in Chicago, New York City, Washington, D.C., there have been major outbreaks. That's why the U.S. is one of the leaders in cases. But when I say certain communities, it has been primarily among certain communities. And so people outside of those communities are not as high at risk. And that community is generally men who have sex with men. And it's circulating among them not because it's a sexually transmitted disease, but because it is in that community and they have these tight-knit networks with a lot of contact.
Okay.
And it spreads really well through physical contact.
And I think that messaging has gotten out to those communities who are at risk.
It has, and they have responded beautifully. I wish that every community would respond the way that that community has responded. They've spread vaccine drive information. They've spread all sorts of great how to protect yourself information, and cases are coming down.
Yeah, I looked last night and it looked like the cases in New York City are plummeting, probably for that reason. Now, Carolyn Mecki has a comment here. Why is there a rumor that monkeypox is a sexually transmitted infection? And I should mention, it can be transmitted by sex. Am I right about that?
It can be transmitted during sex. So the difference between a disease like monkeypox and a sexually transmitted infection, sexually transmitted infections are transmitted because of sex. So because of that transfer of fluids during sex. Monkeypox is transmitted primarily through the skin-to-skin contact, and especially skin-to-skin contact where there's any breakages in the skin. And so it's transmitted during sex because there's a lot of skin-to-skin contact during sex.
Sure.
But it's not necessarily sexually transmitted in the sense that it's being transmitted because of the sex. It's just because of the skin-to-skin contact.
And here's a question from Melissa Rimza. Is there a difference between a sexually transmitted disease and one that tends to be transmitted sexually? I've seen people try to parse this or try to thread this needle and say, well, it's sexually transmissible, but it can be transmitted in other ways. And in some ways, it's sort of like herpes, right? Herpes is also skin to skin, and it affects the anogenital region. It can be transmitted sexually, but also by close contact. Even HIV, of course, we in the medical profession are aware of needle sticks, which isn't sex transmitting HIV. So it is the case that things that we think of as being sexually transmitted diseases or infections can be transmitted in other ways. Why do you suppose we're being so careful about this terminology?
So there's no clear line. It's a very gray area. And this is why I say epidemiologists will answer questions with it depends, because there's no clear line of here's where it becomes a sexually transmitted infection. And we are being very careful because there is a history of stigma against men who have sex with men and diseases transmitted by those men. Particularly with HIV, which was originally, it was a neglected disease and an ignored disease for so long because it was transmitting primarily, it was thought to be transmitting among men who have sex with men. It was in the broader community, and we know, of course, now that everybody is at risk, but at the time it was thought to be a disease associated with that community, and so the stigma became a problem. And so we're very careful about our wording because we want to avoid that stigma. I
agree, but we should also be clear-eyed about how things get transmitted. It's very helpful, for instance, to know that HIV is transmitted by body fluids and that typical contact, handshake, patting someone on the shoulder, even a kiss on the cheek is unlikely to transmit HIV, is not going to transmit HIV. So being aware of how it's transmitted is very useful and can kind of avoid other kinds of stigmas. It looks like, Athena, you're about to say something.
Yeah, well, we have some questions about exactly that, which is how can monkeypox be transmitted? And what does that then mean for PPE? So should it be based on, avoiding tactile contact, or can it be passed by air? We also have a question from Annie here about whether a handshake could transmit it.
Or a toilet seat. I mean, there's, again, when we kind of plunge into this anxiety apocalypse, we have to say, what are the kinds of things that we should be worried about? I'm going to make one comment. If someone comes in, and we've had a few people that have had a rash, and we've been at least flagging those folks as possible monkeypox. Again, I'm not aware of how many cases have been identified in that way, but we are advised to wear a full, personal protection equipment with gown, gloves, masks, and kind of the same way we did with COVID-19 and patients that might have that disease. I think we're at a stage in this illness where we don't really know exactly what we need to worry about. What is your take on that, Becky?
So obviously in a healthcare setting, you're going to have a lot of skin to skin contact. So the PPE of the gown and the gloves is really important. In the normal community, I'm not so worried about a handshake as long as you're regularly washing your hands or using hand sanitizer. So a random handshake, a random touch, not so concerning. As far as secondhand contact, maybe not a toilet seat. I don't know for certain, but I can imagine that a toilet seat would not be likely to be a good way to spread the disease, because especially it needs contact with breaks in the skin. And so that's not as common. We do worry about secondhand contact through things that are against your skin for a long period of time. So one area that the CDC was very clear about early on is bondage gear.
Oh,
So
tell us about that.
yes,
That came up in the email exchange earlier, and I was like,
yes,
"What, bondage? Tell us what's
so
going on with that."
because it was spreading among the community of men who have sex with men, and bondage gear is fully embraced by that community. It was made very clear that bondage gear would be a great way to transmit, because the virus can live on the surface, and then if you're sharing bondage gear among participants, that could be an issue. So just you wash it, you clean it, you sanitize it in between use. Same with your sheets, that you want to change sheets between sexual partners. This though seems that I don't feel like I should need to tell you that you should wash your bondage gear and your sheets between sexual partners. Please, let's just take care of ourselves and clean and sanitize things that go against our bodies and in our private parts. Please.
I love that you came across there, or there was some sort of a this was in the zeitgeist or in social media or in some of the email exchanges that you were involved in, Becky, that this bondage cleaning behavior. Yeah, sure. Makes sense to me. But
we're getting a lot of comments here. Yeah. Also a question about what product should you use for cleaning?
How should we sanitize our bondage gear? I'm going to go with just plain old the same stuff we use for hand sanitizer, right?
I would guess so. I'm not an expert, but I would guess hand sanitizer, similar things.
Mm-hmm.
One more question kind of along these lines about sort of protection. So Pamela Winfrey is asking, am I okay if I've had a smallpox vaccine?
And I am also old enough to have had a smallpox vaccination. So I think I've got the scar on my shoulder to prove it. Are we protected?
We don't know.
That's not a satisfying answer.
I know. But we suspect that smallpox vaccines are protective. But one important thing to know is you need to know if you really did get the smallpox vaccine, or if you, for instance, got a polio vaccine that would also potentially leave a scar on your arm.
Oh, interesting.
So there are people with vaccine scars on their arms. BCG from tuberculosis.
That also causes a scar?
That can also
I'm thinking about what's it called where they have the little two-pronged device that makes a little, they actually almost make a little break in the skin and they introduce the vaccine. You know what I'm talking about?
No,
I know Jessica Brinkworth does.
Yeah.
Maybe we could bring her into the conversation too.
We should bring Jessica Brinkworth in on the conversation. I think she's been attacked by zombies though, so she's.
Right. So
I think she can't join us by video. And also let's just make sure that we're clear here. What kind of vaccine is this? So we have a comment. Didn't know there was a vaccine, right? There isn't a widespread vaccine for monkeypox, right? Can we talk a little bit about what the vaccine situation is? And hi, Jessica.
Yeah, hi.
Thanks for joining us, Jessica. I should mention, Jessica runs the Evolutionary Immunology and Genomics Lab at University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. And we're lucky to have her join us also. So thank you, Jessica, for even though you have been zombified and you're dealing with your own personal apocalypse, you don't have to get into details about that, but I understand that you're not able to join us by video link.
Oh, yeah. No, I'll just tell you, I straight up have a cold and I sneezed so much that I put my back out. So that's my situation. I can't stand, I can't sit.
Yeah.
So I am doubly zombified. Yeah. So there is a vaccine. It was approved in the US by the FDA in 2018. It actually been approved in Europe and Canada in 2013, I believe. So it's been slow to market for a bunch of reasons, including that it is an attenuated virus. So it's a weakened virus. It's a version of monkeypox, Ankara strain, which presumably will get renamed. In any case,
So Jessica, it's different from the smallpox vaccination that we got back in the day.
Well, yeah, it is in a number of ways. It's different, but one of the reasons why I think the vaccine that most people are probably thinking about most of the time right now is either COVID or flu. And in both of those cases, there's this really well established. So first off, the COVID vaccine is very easy, very quick to produce. It's a very elegant vaccine, requires no live components. Influenza, generally speaking, does involve isolation of proteins from live components, but yeah, there's been this like elegant, smooth production system in place for decades that allows for it to be produced very, very quickly. In this case, they have to rear live virus, cleanly isolate it, and get it into a vaccine. So it takes a lot longer to produce it. It's made by a company, Jynneos. That's no, the name of the vaccine is Jynneos. I'm getting it all mixed up. It's got a very strange name. The company has like,
I think there were a couple vaccines, yeah.
there might be another one in production now. The primary one that was that's been approved by the FDA is this particular attenutenuated version.
So should people be getting the vaccine if they can, or only if they're in particular groups that are vulnerable? What's the recommendation?
So here's the problem with the disease that affects an area of the world primarily that no one is sending a whole lot of money to prevent it. There's been an ongoing outbreak.
You mean sub-Saharan Africa?
Well, this is West Africa in particular.
West Africa.
Moment. Nigeria has had an ongoing outbreak since 2017. This vaccine was specifically produced to help with that and ongoing pressure that's in that region. And it's still, it's still going on, and it's an expensive vaccination. So the production times are long, and now all of a sudden the demand is really high. So taking the US, last month it was estimated it would take the US until March to meet a third of its required vaccine requirements for this, for just the men who have sex with men population in the United States.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wait, say that again. How long?
It would take till March.
Oh, wow.
To meet one third of the demand.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it's not great. And we have seen a spike, a very small spike in cases in the United States 3 weeks out from the start of school. So there are cases that are moving around the broader community. So it is a little bit of a concern.
So because we only have a few minutes left in the show, and I hate to do this because we have a really disgusting picture, but I feel like we need to show it, right?
Yeah, what are we talking about when we talk about monkeypox?
Exactly.
It's variable in how it presents, but the presentation often, if not usually or always, involves a rash.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to put up for maybe about 10 seconds a picture that has like four pictures that show like the progression of monkeypox. If you do not want to see it, look away. We will say when we put the that set of images, when we take them off, and we won't put it up long, but just so you know what you're about to see. And maybe Becky, you can talk us through it real quick. So we'll just put it up for about 10 seconds and then we'll take it down and keep talking about it after that.
Sure, and it's true that there's a range of presentations. So from just a few small spots or no spots to everywhere all over the body. And to be clear, it's not just the rash; it's extremely painful. I've heard one person who had the rash on their buttocks who said that it was like sitting on glass.
Wow. Okay, we're putting it up.
Okay,
we're putting it up now. Here we go.
So you see that you can go from very small isolated spots to the large papules, and then those can become pustules, which then burst and become scabs. And while it's in the macule to pustule form, it is extremely painful. So it's just pain all over your body. From what I've heard from people who've experienced it, it's some of the worst pain they've had in their life.
And it can get really serious too. Those crops can coalesce and shed off.
All right.
Mhm.
It is down now. So if you were
Right.
listening and waiting for it to not be visible, it's down now. The one part we didn't talk about is the end, the scabs. So are you still contagious at that point if there's scabs?
Maybe, right? It depends.
Yeah,
I learned
it
that from Dr.
depends.
Smith.
Yes. Yes. So some people have been contagious for weeks.
And listen, I think that there's, even though we talked about the debate over its transmissibility sexually, there's at least some concern that it could be in, reproductive fluids like semen, and that it may actually infect immunoprivileged sites like the testes, in which case it could be there for a long time, which is why they've recommended that folks who have had infections use a condom. And of course, people that are worried about infection, and for other reasons, one should wear a condom for other sexually transmitted infections. So, yeah.
So vaccinia is found, which is a related virus and is what's studied when we study most pox viruses. It's found system-wide, even in mild infections. They find it in every organ. So
Vaccinia, is that cowpox?
I think it's a mouse
Mousepox.
virus.
So vaccinia is cowpox, but then there are alternate versions of vaccinia that can infect other species that are easier to work with than cows, because researching cow diseases takes a lot of space.
Yeah, true. Let's jump into the comments here. Keenan Carter, how long does it take to heal? And will your skin go back to normal? Do we need to worry about scarring?
Yes.
I heard a yes.
Yeah, it's very similar to the chickenpox in that regard. You need to
chickenpox can cause scarring, but oftentimes heals up. I had chickenpox as a kid.
Yeah, but people do get left with tiny scars. If you're talking about like big scars, right? If it goes, the more space you cover, the more likely you are to have some scarring. The other thing is that, and actually a greater concern is that you can inhale the scabs and stuff when you're cleaning up. So people do in severe cases, they often start because people inhale them or they get them in their eyes, like into zones where you're not, where immunity is very different.
Oh, so, and this question here from Carolyn about whether it gets into your eye. I've not read about this particular complication, but it seems like it is at least possible that it could actually cause blindness.
Yeah, it causes blepharitis, absolutely. And then on top of that, you can also get a corneal infection that'll just take you can just take your eyesight right out. So yeah, it's a concern. It does happen.
So yeah, secondary infections. Is that something that that you, either one of you experts have read about?
Yeah,
after one gets
risk. I'm so sorry, Joe. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you were starting to answer the question.
I'm going to interrupt all of you guys because we've got 2 minutes left, and we need to talk about what this all means for the future of pandemic. So, people are asking, is there cowpox too? Is the Black Death coming back? So
So many good comments. Gosh, we could talk about it for hours, couldn't we? But we have a couple of minutes. Rats.
Yeah. So is the Black Death coming back?
Never went away.
Just in a pandemic. Oh, there we go.
Ooh.
So Black Death.
Oh my gosh, another apocalypse to worry about.
Yes.
Prairie dogs. I know it's here in the southwestern region of the U.S.
So how do we figure out if we need to be worried or not about all of these apocalypses, which, by the way, that's the plural of apocalypses.
Not apocalypti.
Nope, it's apocalypses. How do we figure out what to do, when we need to respond, how we need to respond? Maybe Becky, you could take that.
So that's always an interesting question. Jessica mentioned that this particular outbreak of monkeypox started in Nigeria in 2017. And one of the reasons that it got so bad is that we didn't respond until it showed up in Europe.
Yeah.
And so having a response that gets to everywhere in the world is important. And Nigeria still isn't seeing vaccines. So we're allowing a lot of diseases to develop in areas that are underserved or are actively punished for sharing that they have diseases.
Yeah. And the more that we neglect these diseases, the more there are opportunities for them to evolve and become better at infecting us.
Right. And
so
the thing to point out with all of these is that they are all zoonotic, meaning they're shared among humans and people. 75% of emerging diseases are.
One tiny
little
between
glimmer of non-human animals, and people. Right.
Yes, I agree about this concern about zoonotic diseases. A glimmer of hope with regard to this one is that there have been no cases of healthcare workers getting it at work, from what I understand. And so that's good, at least for as long as that lasts.
All right. Final question here, I think, before we have to close up, which is how do you guys personally deal with the anxieties that come from all of these apocalypses? Maybe Jessica, could you give us a 10-second answer, and then we'll just go around before we finish up? How do you deal with the anxieties?
The very first thing I do every single time, so my feeling is that the more information I have, the more comfortable I am. So by the time that we've heard about a problem and it hits the news, there have already been multiple spillover events. Most of them will be self-limited. There could be dozens, it could be hundreds, right? There's a lot of spillovers that happen before you have emergence. And so from my standpoint, the more information I know about the family of pathogens, and then, I'm happy to dig like right into info. The best way I find is that I go to the daily reports for the WHO at the beginning of these things. That's really helpful for me.
Great. And just
I agree.
And just to be clear, spillover is when you have a zoonotic disease. That's when it goes from non-human animals into humans. So so it sounds like a general principle that's sort of coming up is that we should be monitoring those better, and we should be responding earlier rather than just like waiting to see if it's going to be a problem before we do anything about it. Great. Becky, you want to jump in?
So the best thing that you can do to prevent any of these infections is good hygiene, taking care of yourself, eating healthily, and fighting for health equity, fighting for health justice. So a lot of these come out of situations of injustice. So fighting politically for health justice, and then for yourself, getting your vaccines regularly, everything that's recommended, and eating healthily and practicing good hygiene.
Maybe even sleeping every once in a while.
Sleeping is important. Sleep hygiene is part of good hygiene.
Thanks. Dr. Zed, how about you? How do you deal with the anxieties?
I'll agree with the other two experts here that it's important to learn what we can. And this is a moving target, right? Our understanding is different now than it was a month ago or 2 months ago. And that will be the case as this comes into clearer focus. I will say it doesn't look like this is a problem in the way that SARS-CoV-2 was a problem. The number of cases is far fewer. It looks like our public health interventions targeting, intervening with people that are at highest risk and doing things like ring vaccination when there are cases, that seems to actually be helping and driving that transmission down, so that with a rho value of less than 1. So we're getting better control over this pandemic than we have over other ones, at least for now. So there are reasons for hope.
Great. Well, this has been just an amazing show. Thank you to all of you for being a part of it. Dr. Zed, thanks for taking us through this. And Jessica, Becky, thanks for being here with us.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for that.
Always happy to talk disease.
Right. Me too. And that'll wrap things up, won't it? So a special thank you to our guests, Dr. Becky Smith, Dr. Jessica Brinkworth. Thanks again to Athena for helping with this conversation. And that wraps up another episode of the Dr. Zed Show. Thank you so much for joining us for this truly apocalyptic discussion, and join us next time. Until then, we'll see you and be safe.
And if the whole world says that we're crazy,